So how do they give out the aleias? So the halacha discusses it, and then it's very interesting. The halacha says the 3 Yisraelim get the first 3 aliyot, and the rest go to the Levis.
But if they don't have Kohen, they don't have Father. Everybody
But
can take everything. There is
saying,
no order.
there's a whole section in halacha that goes with it. If we had one Yisrael and 9 Kohanim, the Yisrael gets the first aliyah, and the rest go to the Kohanim.
What if the Kohanim are Amaretz and
There's nothing to do.
They wouldn't make a difference.
Everybody the same.
The Yisraelim would get first, and then the Kohanim afterwards, or the Levis afterwards. That's like it's v'nahapuchus. It's backwards. Which, by the way,
you're gonna break it. It's gonna cause damage.
You're not going to be able
gave
to
us out
open
on
it.
Hanukkah.
It's a double-sided. Not with this kind of tool.
He's a locksmith. He's gonna
See
tell
how
you
you can do all that.
He's a locksmith.
See how you can do all that.
It's not gonna work.
You need a picky. It's a
here.
double-sided. You cannot open it.
It's not.
This is what?
100%.
Kriyat Yamsuf.
That explains why it's so.
This is,
Come on, man.
what is it? It's broken. Machzit HaShekel.
Wait, you must have your like locksmith
This is
kid or something. Can you?
Shabbat what?
It's not gonna
It's a
work.
double-sided. Single side you can
Shabbat
do, you
HaGadol.
can jiggle it and open.
Yeah,
Not
double-
This is
double
Yom
sided.
Kippur Katan.
It's not
It's,
pickle.
Which
it's
is a
a
fast-
wafer from both sides.
What is this?
How do you know?
The dream of Yaakov. Malachim
He's
Olim
installed it.
Yordim.
Are you the one that installed it?
Purim. Think v'nahapuchim.
You had to put a double-sided lock.
Bris.
To prevent people like you to open it.
4 minim sukkot. You
People
know.
like me.
Lula Esra.
Oh, I'm
Korban Ola.
No, because the rabbi was
Korban
actually
Ola.
asking.
See, you gotta do the rest of it.
You put the water bowl?
The middle one there is very hard. This one's very hard. That's you're not gonna get. But other than that, it's fine. They're riddles.
We don't have sugar.
Keep your. Okay, let's go learn some Torah.
That's okay. I'm sweet enough
It's
already.
okay. When
Okay, did you warm up already? You got your blood boiling? Okay,
Let's do it.
let's go. Let's do it. Here we go. A lot of different things. Oh, you got your coat. Wow.
What about the rest of us?
That's a cold, come on.
You wanna wear my fleece?
Listen, I stopped. I gave up on every Bukharian show in the neighborhood. I even stopped going to the kollel. Why? Because they keep the thermostat at 73.
This is the legal way. It's legally 72.
Yeah,
Legal way.
So
The
what? That means so it's
Shvaz
warm
Chayot,
in there.
I go to Rabbi Savitsky's now.
So it's warm.
68 degrees. Very comfortable.
Oh, you like it that way? Okay.
Yeah, but this is 62 something.
Yeah, this is a little different. Okay, we'll warm it up over here. Here we go. Vayigash
Esh
Elosh Yehuda.
HaTorah.
I could tell.
Okay, so they're working it out. Okay, here we go. Vayigash Elosh. Let's see what we can figure out. There's a lot of things I don't want to talk about tonight. So it says that Yehuda approached Yosef. Why Yehuda? Well, the short answer is Yehuda is the melech. He's the designated king, so he handles all negotiations. But the Meforshim, they give a different answer. That means when the Binyamin was caught with the cup, and Binyamin and everybody thought they were going to all be slaves to Paro, so Yehuda accepted that. We sold Joseph into slavery. Hashem is getting back at us. We're all going to be slaves. When Yosef said, everybody is free to go home, the only one that has to stay behind is Binyamin. So then Yehuda said, no. That's a game that I'm not going to buy into. Why did Yehuda approach Yosef? So he explains why. He says, because I took responsibility. The sign of a leader is someone who takes responsibility. Yehuda said, my father wasn't going to send Binyamin down with anybody. But when I said to my father, I know what it means to lose 2 kids. Yaakov was crying. Yosef is gone, now Binyamin is gone, Shimon is gone. I lost children. Yehuda said, I know what it means to lose children. I buried 2 children. So, give Binyamin to me. I promise you I'll bring him back. So Yehuda says to Yosef, the reason why I'm talking more than anybody else is because I took responsibility. And when you take responsibility, it forces you to be the spokesperson. I have to speak on behalf. Now, the Meforshim, very interesting. The Meforshim say that Yehuda's bones in the desert were rolling. It says that when they carried Yehuda in the desert to Israel to be buried in Israel, Nizgalgulu Atzomos, his bones were rolling in the grave. until Moshe Rabbeinu came and davened that Yehuda should be at peace. The Gemara says, why was his bones rolling in the grave? Because he made a promise. What did he say to his father? I will bring Binyamin back. And he didn't keep his promise. So they all said, what are you talking about? He kept Binyamin safe. Binyamin was safe. But the Das Akeni Nibali Atosa says something fascinating. If you look in the Psukim, it says Yosef sent back to Yaakov 10 mules, 10 donkeys fully laden. Which means 10 donkeys had 10 riders. Who were the 10 riders? The boys, the Shvatim, the brothers. But there were 11 brothers. Yosef kept Binyamin in Egypt. He didn't send them back. When the brothers said, send Binyamin back with us, Yosef said, why didn't your father want to send Binyamin in the first place? He said, because he was afraid. You travel on the highways, it's dangerous. Something could happen to him. So Yosef said, and he wanted me to take my brother, send him back to Israel, where something could happen to him, and then he's going to come a few weeks later back to Egypt. Our father, if he was here, if we could pick up a phone, and call our father and ask our father, should we send Binyamin back or not, what do you think the father would say? No, leave him in Egypt. Leave him where he's safe. So Yosef never sent Binyamin back home. And therefore, Yehuda never fulfilled his promise. And therefore his bones rolled in the desert.
May I ask a question? Yehuda promised to bring Binyamin back to Yaakov.
Right, correct.
But Yaakov went to Egypt.
Correct.
So Binyamin went back into Yaakov's camp.
Eventually.
So,
But when he came,
so he kept his promise.
No, he didn't.
The
No,
promise
no.
was he bring him back.
Yaakov is home, he sees the 10 brothers coming, he sees no Binyamin. Until they could explain everything, for 5 minutes Yaakov's heart skipped a beat. Yehuda failed his brother. Failed his father.
So Binyamin didn't go back with them?
No.
Really?
It says, if you look at the Psukim, it says Yosef sent back 10 donkeys fully laden. And the unfortunately say, why 10? 10 brothers, 10 donkeys, 10 riders. There were 11 brothers. Who didn't go back? Binyamin. It's a fascinating thing.
I thought it
The
was
Das
everybody.
Akeni Mibali Atosva says that. And because of that, Yehuda needed kapara. I'll give you an example. I once told you this, I think, but I'll tell it to you again. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. Every few years, every 2 or 3 years, my sisters, I have 3 older sisters, my sisters and I would go back to Denver for Kever Avos. My father's buried there, so we go to the grave. My grandparents are buried there. I have uncles and aunts and cousins buried there, and I have cousins that still live there. So every 2 or 3 years we go back. We went back right before Corona, so probably next year we'll go again. One year, my sister, Mrs. Crone, and Mrs. Tice, my 2 sisters here in New York with me, we flew to Chicago, and my sister in Chicago joined us on the flight from Chicago to Denver. So here we're on the plane, it's in Chicago O'Hara, and we're about to take off, and we're all together, and we take a picture of all of us together, and then we call our mother. I call my mother, we call our mother to say, we're all together, we're about to go to Denver, we're going to
fly.
we're going to
Don't
go.
put the eggs in one basket.
So my mother turned to us, my mother said to us, we thought we did a great mitzvah, we were so excited, and my mother said, I am not comfortable with all my children on one plane. So my mother didn't sleep that night. She just had a sleepless night. So here we are, 4 kids, thinking we're going to Kever Avos, we're going to visit my mother's parents. We are doing Kibbud Aim like you can't believe. We're like Asa with Kibbud Av Aim. We're at the top of the line. And the truth is, we caused my mother more grief than we can imagine. So, you never know how a person thinks. You think you know how your parents think. You never know how your parents think. It's just an amazing thing, that how different it was. So Yehuda, he promised Yaakov, I will bring Binyamin back. Never kept his promise. Yeah, he kept them safe. Yes, they were eventually united. It was a technicality. The Gemara says his bones literally rolled in the grave until Moshe davened for his menucha. So it's amazing. Now, the next thing is also very amazing. Listen to this. When Yaakov heard Yosef was alive, Yaakov says, I want to go down to Egypt, I want to see Yosef. Okay, and I understand why. I want to see if Yosef is my son, Yosef the Tzaddik, or is he some fancy Egyptian with a title and he's more Goyish than Jewish. I got that. He wants to see him. The plan was Yaakov was going to go down to Egypt, maybe with one or two of the brothers. That's it. There is no record that Yaakov had any intention of relocating the entire family down to Egypt. Why would he move to Egypt? He's in Canaan. More than that, the Meforshim say, Yaakov said, my father Yitzchak never left Israel. I should leave Israel? I'm not leaving. The Sipurno, listen to this Sipurno. It's a shocking Sipurno. The Sipurno Mevi Dover Pele, he says. This is what the Meforshim bring down. That Hashem said to Yaakov, I want you to go down to Egypt. Yaakov says, I don't want to go down to Egypt. I'm very happy here. Why should I go down to Egypt? Then Hashem answered him. He says that here in Canaan, they like you. Since they like you, in 2 generations, there won't be any Jews left. You'll all be assimilated. But in Egypt, the sinas hagoyim, the hatred, in Egypt they hate you. Because they won't even eat bread with an ivri. And it's the hatred of Mitzrayim that will keep you safe, and you will not assimilate. So Hashem said to Yaakov, I know you want to stay in Israel. You think staying in Israel is the right idea. I'm telling you that will be your biggest mistake. Go down to Egypt. And as long as the Jews were in Goshen and totally isolated, they were okay. Nothing happened. As a matter of what? As a matter of fact, when the brothers came down, Yosef said, I'm going to take you to see Paro. Ooh, okay, we're going to see Paro. That's pretty scary. What's Paro going to ask us? Paro's going to ask you, what do you do for a living? Okay, what should we answer him? Tell him you're shepherds. Ooh, Paro likes shepherds? No, Paro hates shepherds. So why am I going to tell him I'm a shepherd? I'll tell him I'm doing mortgages. I'll tell him I'm doing real estate. Why would I tell him I'm a shepherd if Paro hates shepherds? He says, you want to tell him you're a shepherd. Because if he hates shepherds, he'll move you in a town that's the furthest away from all the Egyptians. Goshen. And then you'll be safe. The more distance you put between you and Paro, the safer you're going to be. So Yosef had it all planned out. He had it all planned out. From beginning to end, he had everything worked out.
Pandemic.
Yeah. He had it all planned out. It says, for example, when Yosef said to the brothers, I need Yosef, at first they didn't believe him, right? Then he had to say, I'm Yosef, your brother. So the Chassam Sofer says that Yosef spoke to them Lashon Kodesh. Why should that make a difference? He says because unless you're frum, unless you keep mitzvos, you can speak Hebrew, but you can't speak Lashon Kodesh. Lashon Kodesh eludes you. If you can speak Lashon Kodesh, it's a sign that you keep Torah and mitzvos. So Yosef spoke to them in Lashon Kodesh in order to convince them, look, I need Yosef. I'm Yosef. I'm the same brother that you sent down. Then, the famous Brisker Rov. Yosef said, I need Yosef. Ha'od avichai. Is my father still alive? And of course, the Gemara says, Abba koyin bardala, oy lanu liyom adin, oy lanu liyom hatochacha. The day of din, the day of tochacha. Yosef is the youngest of all the Shvatim. And all he said to them, I need Yosef. 2 words. And they were speechless. Imagine when Hashem talks to us. So the Brisker Rov says, what was the musar that Yosef gave them? He says he didn't give them any musar. He just explained to them, look, I'm Yosef, I'm the king. All my dreams came true. So you convinced yourself that the truth was on your side. Reality came and showed you that I was right and you were wrong. He says the biggest tochacha is when Hashem shows you your self-contradictions, your own contradictions. That's a very humbling thing. You know, the more you create, you create realities that are fueled often by self-preservation. We convince ourselves that we're right and everyone else is wrong. But we're not gay about Dover. We have negias. So he brings down the Brisker brings down the famous Gemara. The Gemara says that Eliyahu met a person, and he said to that person, "What are you going to say to Hashem after 120 years?" He says, "What's the problem?" He says, "You don't even know how to read Aleph. You can't even daven from a siddur. You don't even know a pasuk chumash. What are you going to say to Hashem after 120 years?" He says, "I got it all covered. I'm not worried. I got it. I got my answer down pat." So Eliyahu says, "Wow, you have an answer? Tell me what the answer is." So he says to him, "I'm going to tell Hashem, you created me stupid. I'm learning disabled. I wasn't smart. You didn't give me the ability to learn languages. I couldn't learn Hebrew. So I just don't have the ability. You can't fault me. And Hashem will let me right into Gan Eden." So Eliyahu said to the guy, "What do you do for a living?" Famous answer, "I'm a fisherman." He says, "Okay, well, it's not hard to be a fisherman. You take a piece of wood, you tie a string, and you put a worm on, and you fish." He says, "Oh, no, what are you talking about? I grow flax. And I make the flax into cords, and then I make nets. And you got to be careful with the nets. If you make the holes too big, the fish go through. If you make it too small, the fish can see the net, so it's got to be the right size. Then you got to know where to put the nets, and when to put them, and what time of day, and how to collect them, and how to bring the fish in." He says, fishing, to make a profit, to be a successful fisherman, is a complicated business. So the Yohanavi said to him, "If you're smart enough to know how to fish, you're smart enough to learn the aleias." And that's what a Yom Hadin is. You show a person their contradictions. You say to a person, "How come you never gave $1 to tzedakah?" He says, "I have no money. I'm broke." But every week you go out to eat for $150 to buy a steak at the fanciest restaurants. It's a contradiction. You ask a lady, how come she doesn't go to a shiur 1 hour a week? "I have no time between the kids and the homework and the house. I don't have a minute to spare." But you spend 5 hours a week on the phone speaking Lashon Hara. So if you have 5 hours a week speaking Lashon Hara, you have an hour to go to a shiur. So it's the contradiction. That's what the Brisker Rav said. It's the contradictions in life that we create, fooling ourselves, that we are so right in everything that we do, that is ultimately the tochacha. He brings down, I saw one of the Meforshim say, Yosef says, "Ani Yosef." They didn't believe him. So Yosef says, "Don't you recognize me?" So the famous Rashi says, "No, we don't recognize you. The last time we saw you, you were 17. You didn't have a beard. Now you have a full beard." So they bring down on the Rashi, he says that Yosef said to the brothers, "But now that I have a beard, look at me. Who do I look like? I'm the spitting image of our father." According to the Midrashim, on the Kisei HaKavod, the shore was Yosef and Yaakov. They looked exactly the same. He says, if you can look at me and you don't see Yaakov's face in me, then there's only one excuse for that. Yaakov, our father, is gone, and you forgot even what he looked like. So he said, "Ha'od Avichai." Is our father alive? Meaning, are you so far removed that you don't see our father, you don't visit our father, you have no idea what our father looks like?
That's why I asked them Avi and not Avinu.
That's right. That's why he asked them Avi. As if to say, had you seen, if you would have just looked at me for one moment, you would have seen our father. It says that when Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim, so Paro asked him, "How old are you?" It's an unusual question.
Because he saw it now.
He saw that he was so old. It's an unusual question. But the answer that they give is that Paro said to Yaakov, he says, when he came down, Yaakov gave full brachos. The Nile rose for Paro, the hunger stopped. So Paro says, boy, this man is full of brachos. If he's full of brachos, the longer he's with us, the more brachos we're going to get. So you want to know, how old are you? And what did Yaakov say? I'm 130, but don't get nervous. My father lived to be 180. On the weekend, I get the Newsday. In the paper, it had an article about a...
Newsday?
I get Newsday, yeah.
Wow, that's old school.
Yeah. I don't get the New York Times because I just can't read about the hatred of Israel. I just can't.
What about the New York Post?
I'm looking for things that are a little bit more toned down. Maybe the Wall Street Journal I should get, a little bit more quality. I get the Newsday. I enjoy the comics. So they had
About the kichels in Mishpacha magazine.
Okay.
I like the kichels.
there you go. So they had an article in there how this lady who's 100 years old traveled to her sister's birthday, who's 103, and her other sister who's 102 was there also. You know, there's a whole article about these three women, 100, 102, 103. So Yaakov said to Paro, I may look old, I'm 130, but don't worry, my father's to be 180, you know, I got plenty of years left. They bring down a story with the Shagas Aryeh. They quoted in the name of Chaim Soloveitchik, the Brisker Rav, that the Shagas Aryeh applied for a rabbinical job in the city of Metz. And he made a very good impression, but they asked him how old he was, the search committee, and he told them he's 70 years old. So the search committee said to him, you know, Rabbi, you're a perfect rabbi for our community, but you're 70 years old. In a year or two, we're going to have to find another rabbi. I mean, who hires a rabbi who's 70 years old? And the Shagas Aryeh said to them, don't be so worried. I have another 20 years ahead of me. And they hired him. Wow. And he lived to be 90. He died at age 90.
Wow.
So
Why did you ask for 110?
He should have. He should have. He should have. But he says that the Brisker Rav brings us down the story that the famous Shagas Aryeh got a job as the Rav of Metz when he was 70. My brother-in-law told me a story on Shabbos. I ate by him on Shabbos.
Rabbi today?
Rabbi Kron. He said to me that there's this rabbi in Buffalo. Now, why was he telling me? Because Buffalo, he says, you know, the winters in Buffalo are very cold. Very cold.
It's just underneath Toronto.
It's very cold. You know, maybe not as cold as Winnipeg. I mean, Winnipeg is cold. You know, my brother said, you know, it doesn't compare to what you went through.
A few years back, the Niagara Falls froze. It's something unreal.
Yeah, it's unreal.
Froze. The water froze.
So listen to this. So listen
No, froze.
Okay, so the rabbi of Buffalo, when he takes vacation with his family during the wintertime to warm up, they go to Miami to warm up. So he was on a flight to Miami. Fate would have it, there was a problem with the plane, it was a detour to Kennedy. Then he had to spend the night overnight in New York. Then he made it to Miami the next day. He's waiting in line for the rent-a-car, I guess Hertz or Avis rent-a-car, and he's so afraid that the car that he had reserved the day before, probably they gave it away. He's not going to even have it. You know, they're not going to keep the reservation. So he's waiting in line for the rent-a-car, and a frum Jew, the yarmulke, cuts in front of him, goes into the line in front of him.